In a digital age where the boundaries between personal freedom and technological encroachment continue to blur, how do we navigate that complex relationship between ethics, technology, and our inherent human rights? Well, today I'm going to sit down with Jonathan MacDonald, a trailblazer in the realm of ethical technology and the visionary behind Self.app. And with a history steeped in the fight for user control and privacy, dating right back to the 70s, Jonathan offers a compelling narrative to the potential of technology to empower rather than diminish. And as we explore his journey today, from the early days of computing to leading the charge against tech dystopian trends, and we've all seen a few of those on our news feeds over the last few weeks, Jonathan's going to share his vision for a future where technology serves humanity on our terms. But what does it take to pivot the tech industry towards a more ethical path? And how does Self embody this shift by putting control back into the hands of its users? Well, these are just a few of the questions we're going to explore today, so buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way towards Australia today, where Jonathan is waiting to share his story. So, a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure thing. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Jonathan MacDonald. I've been an entrepreneur for almost 40 years now, so I'm older than I sound. And so now I've been in building businesses and helping companies grow, small and large, including my own. I've had 10 startups on my own. I'm on my 11th now. And so, yeah, I'm basically always doing one thing, which is always the same, except people call it something different. So what I've been involved with is always trying to reverse the power that big tech has over the public and reinstate it as subservient to people, to work for people under their control, including having your data to yourself, sovereign, and your own agency of your information. And so that's what I've always been doing since I was a kid, since the late 70s. And so now obviously it's slightly more fashionable than it was in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but it's still basically bashing your head against the wall and trying to convince the world, which is full of humans, that it could be a lot more utopian and dystopian if we thought of things differently. That's basically what I do.
And that's what so much of what I love about what you're doing here, and why I invited you on the podcast, because I'm curious, though, before we go into this and dig a little bit deeper into your story, I'd love to find out how it all began for you. You said this started right from a kid. What lit the spark in you, that entrepreneurial side, using technology for freedom, etc.? Was there a pivotal moment that put you on this path?
Yeah, I think that my starting point was my father was a computer scientist and an engineer for various tech, large infrastructure firms like Marconi and NASA, and so he bought a computers home when I was growing up, like I was 3, 4, 5 years old. So I was in the mid 70s exposed to, long before the World Wide Web. I mean, this is almost 20 years before the World Wide Web. So this is old school internet. And so I've always been looking at these tools as what we can do with them through my non-cynical, innocent perspective, I figured that we could get these things to help us. And little did I know that there is an entirely cynical version of that, which was, no, you human are the battery. Your attention and tolerance of our junk will feed our shareholder value. And those concepts don't occur to you when you're 5. And when they do occur to you when you're kind of like 10 or 15, this horrible moment of realization either stops you in your tracks and you give up, or you double down and go, well, this is what I'm going to dedicate the rest of my career to sorting out.
Oh, so much to love about that. And I always say on every episode here that technology works best when it brings people together. And I love demystifying technology, talk about a language that everyone can understand and how it can transform our lives, our work, and even world. And I think all too often in life, and we were just talking about your childhood there, we begin with this go to school, get job, get married, get house. And I think there's so much more to life than that. And your work exemplifies that. And it's also that fundamental human right to freedom that you seem to be so passionate about as well, especially in the context of modern business models and technology platforms. So to set the scene for our conversation today, can you just share how self-technology embodies this principle, everything we're talking about here, particularly in the contrast to those walled ecosystems that are prevalent in the industry right now?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my work with self is multi-layered because on the face of it, I'm involved in creating a personal language model, artificial intelligence, or what we call adaptive AI, which is under your control and is your personal algorithm with your self-server, and that's what it looks like, right? From the you go to Self.app, you'll see that's the offering, as it were. But the wider picture, the broader landscape, is somewhat more abstract than that. What I believe the future of operating systems should work like is a device agnostic way that any application that's used is yours, under your control, and is intelligent to your preferences and desires and demands. And so for that end game of an operating system or operating systems like that are the one that I have been building for eons behind the scenes, is called Entirety, waiting for three primary things to happen. One was distributed ledger technology to really work, blockchain. The second is artificial intelligence to be able to be under your control. And the third is quantum computing. The engine room for that has to be your own personal algorithms. And so if you kind of build it backward from the end game, which arguably is actually a starting line, the components that are required, if we look at the bits there, I mean, I was involved in the crypto world since the 90s, the early chat rooms of the World Wide Web. I was a follower of a guy called Tim May and a guy called Eric Hughes and a guy called John Gilmore. And so there was quite a rebellious streak to those conversations. That became the cypherpunk movement. And part of the cypherpunks electronic mailing list was pretty edgy at the time. That was the early days of crypto, blockchain. And there's the B Money paper in 98 by a guy called Wei Dai. 10 years later, the Bitcoin white paper. So, by the time Bitcoin came out, not only were we all mining coins each day, but equally, we'd already been talking about it for 15 years, and various different structures. So that was that part. With Self, on the AI side, I was watching through the 80s. There was the AI winter, as it was known, 80s into 90s. And then the machine learning algorithms started to kick in quite heavily, and IBM and other firms were really kind of investing into these spaces. And then I noticed that the large language models were moving further and further away from what I would see as ideology of human rights, not least the fact that our first fundamental human right, according to the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, is that all humans are born free and equal in dignity and rights. And I've always natively figured that included our own personal data. So quite how that's been categorically and blasphemously abused is something that I find shocking to this day. And so started to build Self as an antidote to that. And then, of course, we need the environment of quantum computing to process things in a far more efficient way. And luckily, because of various different Moore's law, exponential growth theorem and realities, these things are now more possible. Things that I was dreaming about in 1979 became slightly more realistic in 89, quite visible in 99, and then watershed moment 2008, 2009, 2019, the world started to pick some of these concepts up and piece them together. And I think by 2029, we'll look back and go, well, that was obvious. And everything seems improbable until it's done, right? So it's been a bit of a mission.
And you said, looking back there, you were right in the heart of things from the beginning of the Bitcoin days and how everything looks obvious. Did you spend 10,000 Bitcoins on two pizzas back in the day? Do you have any war stories from those days?
Yeah, I spent quite a number of Bitcoin on a car, and I prefer not to talk about it.
And as you said there, you know, the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it champions that idea of all human beings are born free and equal with dignity and rights. But you take a look around out there and that's not what we're seeing. So I know this is something you're passionate about. So can you tell me a little bit more about this mission and the development strategies you have at Self, and in what ways you're ensuring that these rights are respected and upheld? They don't have to be a pipe dream. We can make it happen, right?
That's right. I mean, it's not tremendously complicated to change, to at least entertain a perspective that's different. I mean, if you have a perspective of big tech, which is command and control, eyeballs, attention, number go up, shareholder get rich, human put up with it. That's one angle. The other version is, you know, what you could have is a bunch of commitments to how you operate your business and how you build. And so with Self, which is the engine room of entirety, the operating system, which will start to be more visible as the weeks and months go by. At the time of recording, obviously, we're in 2024, where this is our year to actually start telling the public about what we're doing, including light paper and white paper and tokenomics and stuff. But the commitments that we have are the opposite of what I've just mentioned as the kind of dystopian view of large tech. I mean, we have commitments such as, you know, decisions that are made have to be in accordance with human rights. It's not just the first one around freedom, but everything else. We also believe that we shouldn't cause or enable harm while upholding those rights. We believe that enabling people to have control and ownership over their own data and decide how it's used is a fundamental principle. I think that we should all be fully transparent in our practices so that people understand how we operate, not least go on brilliant podcasts like yours, which I find it absolutely brilliant that when you were looking at the podcast and wondering why some of your episodes went on there, it's because you've recorded so many and they only had the first 2,000. So being transparent is part of being on these kind of podcasts, and yours especially. We also think that upholding regulation and legislation is important in the territories, so that we're not operating against the system abhorrently to kind of stick two fingers up to the machine. What I prefer to do is try and fix the machine if possible, or at least 1% at a time, or at least one life at a time. And then finally, to not sacrifice any of our responsibilities in pursuing commercial gain, which is probably the reason why a vast volume of VCs and even private equity and angels have turned their noses up at what we're doing, because the priority is not commercial gain. The priority is human rights. And however, I believe that if you create a significant amount of value to humans, then you can monetize it as you wish in accordance to those rights. So for instance, people will pay for things that they value if they feel is something that's benefiting their lives. They will reluctantly pay for things that they have to get through a paywall for. But over time, I don't believe that those bets are the most solid or have the most longevity. And at the moment, the market would say opposite. And from being rejected by most investors, I've certainly felt the wrath of, you know, answering incorrectly when people say, so surely what you're going to do is you're going to harvest everyone's data and sell it to the highest bidder. And I'm like, no, that sounds horrible. And then there's tumbleweed, you know, the phone goes dead and none of the emails get responded to. But anyway, they're the commitments that we make, and it's not necessarily the most popular view, and it's a pretty lonely journey, but it is not a popularity contest.
100%. I think it was Jack Parsons that once said that freedom is a two-edged sword, of which one edge is liberty and the other edge is responsibility. But I prefer the Spider-Man quote of, with great power comes great responsibility. And in the digital realm, though, how does Self balance these two aspects, particularly in terms of things like user data and privacy? Because, again, huge topics right now.
Yeah, I think the starting point is who's in control.
Yeah.
And if you decide as a tech platform that the user should be in control, then it has a rabbit hole that you go down, which is pretty tricky to navigate, because the end of the Jack Parsons quote you mentioned from 1946 is that both edges of that double-edged sword are exceedingly sharp, and the weapon is not suited to casual, cowardly, or treacherous hands. What that really means is that if you take liberty on one side, which is nice and fun to speak of, people choosing what they do, the responsibility side of things is, well, okay, so let's imagine you create a, let's say, fully decentralized platform where everyone can do everything and there's no law. Then how do you handle people who want to do malevolent things? It's easy when you look at people doing benevolent things because they are operating probably within the law anyway. But if they're doing malevolent things and they're wanting to cause harm to other people, what responsibility do you have as a platform if you've given the absolute freedom to people? So those tricky dinner party questions become your strategic backbone, and you have to have answers to those things. And my answers to those things is in the commitments that I mentioned in terms of upholding the regulations and legislations in the territories that we operate, but also not causing harm to people by upholding human rights. So there's a balancing act here where if, for instance, a country, government or regulatory body said, well, what we require is us to have access to things that you've told humans that is completely theirs, my answer to that would be, well, I'm totally okay with that, provided that we tell the humans that this is what we've been asked to provide and allow the humans the rights to say no. I mean, that's not absurd, right? Surely that's okay. Surely it's all right to give humans the rights to say what happens to their information. And that it seems remarkably straightforward to me if you look at it through the eyes of permission and preference. But it's extraordinarily difficult if what you're trying to do is pull the wool over people's eyes and go, hey, use this GPT platform. It's fun. You can ask it to write you a song or a poem, and look how amazing this graphic imagery is on Midjourney. Of course, we will try and cover over the fact that in the terms and conditions, all of the data isn't actually yours anymore. And if you upload a photo of your kids to Facebook, they actually own the rights to monetize it. We'll worry about that later. You've ticked the terms and conditions. Happy days. I think that's absolutely, categorically against everything that we should be doing as a society.
Couldn't agree more. And as we go further down that rabbit hole, you've opened up the AI word. We've done brilliantly. It's 15 minutes on a tech podcast before we've mentioned it. But you opened the door mentioning Midjourney there. And of course, with the rapid advancement of AI, usually in that argument or any conversation around it, it's not too long until we start talking about the ethical considerations surrounding user data and privacy, because they're getting more and more complex. It is very straightforward, like you said, but some of the rules around that are just incredibly complex. So how do you itself and this adaptive AI platform, how do you navigate these ethical, uncharted digital waters and ensuring that data is not just protected, but also in a manner that benefits the user too?
I think there's two sides to that as well. One is the one that I mentioned in terms of who is in control and whose permission is given, i.e. each individual human. But the other side is our design approach. And the design approach, I don't just mean graphical design, I mean design of our entire corporate structure and our strategy and the features and the way that we come to market, our offering. And the decision criteria based on the commitments that I mentioned earlier is easier when you know what you stand for. And if you have a gray area of what is the right decision under these circumstances, sadly, that gray area tends to skew towards commercial gain. And I'm not saying, by the way, commercial gain is bad. In fact, I think commercial gain is fantastic. It's just that if you sacrifice things that are right for things that will make more profit, then your ultimate purpose is number go up. And then what happens is you end up in a situation where you're looking at decisions of saying, well, is it right for us to quietly sell some of the information we've got to a market research agency? No one will ever know about it. And it will help the balance sheet. We'll be able to build lots of really good things for humans and upholding human rights. But, no one's really going to know if we kind of anonymize information and sell it to a market research agency. We can even class it as providing the world with data. And that seems, quote unquote, innocent with a small I.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is that if your design principles are, well, that's, even if information is anonymized, the user needs to decide whether or not their anonymized information is used in market research. And more so, how about if some of the money that comes from that market research was then given back to consumers at their own demand? Maybe here's a outrageous thought. Maybe they can actually set the price. And so that if they want us to monetize their information, who knew? Maybe they could actually say, well, we want it to happen, and this is the price we want it to happen at. And so it's not tremendously complicated. It's just that it's the opposite of the way that the world used to work.
Love that. And before you came on the podcast, I was doing a little research on you, and I was reading Self-6 commitments and how they're a testament to the dedication that you have towards human rights, transparency, ethical business practices. And knowing what you stand for, writing those mission statements and those commitments is arguably the easy part. So I have to ask, what kind of challenges and triumphs have you encountered on your own unique path when trying to adhere to these commitments, especially when you're faced with the commercial pressures within the tech industry too? Because again, it's quite a balancing act, right?
Yeah, well, you're right. The word commercial pressures answers one of those straight off the bat. The biggest challenge of all is fundraising, because the majority of people think one of two things. One is you're talking nonsense, it's too ideological. The other is, we'll make a load of profit and then we'll believe it. And very, very, very few go, yeah, this is the right thing to do. We'll back it. And which would appear to be the most obvious, but it's certainly the biggest challenge, because that's not the way that the investment seems to work. On the other side, one of the upside, the positive, I guess, is that the loyalty. I mean, we're just in test phase. I mean, we're testing people. We've got several thousand people on the waiting list, and we trick feed a couple of hundred in at a time. There's people anyone can go on Self.app and try stuff out, but the loyalty is incredibly high when you have your own personal AI that remembers you, and you can call it a name and like Alfred or Simon or Justine or whoever, and that then becomes the name of your artificial intelligence, and it will remember you. If you say to Alexa, my favorite color is red, what car out of these three should I choose? Alexa will give you a version of Google results as a reply, similar to almost any form of platform that's theoretically an assistant. Whereas with Self, it actually remembers you and will help you and can record the information that you've sent to it. But so the biggest upside is the fact that the loyalty is extraordinarily high. I mean, Self.app is actually Google without adverts, right? To some extent.
Yeah.
But the even bigger upside is that what we're proving at the moment is that if that engine was the underpinning engine of an operating system, then it's likely that your attachment to the operating system is actually your operating system, if you like. That is very likely to have the escape velocity from the existing OSs like Apple and Google and Microsoft. And that's, it's a bold thing to say, but where the escape velocity will come is not when we raise 500 million or 2 billion. The escape velocity will come when out of 100 people who use the systems that are actually their own systems, the loyalty is in high double-digit percentage. And when you get that level of loyalty and people understanding the power that they have literally within themselves and their self, then the traction likelihood is far more efficient than trying to convince people of yet another Twitter-esque social network, but it's not Twitter, or yet another Facebook, but it's not Facebook. That isn't going to do it, and funky graphics ain't going to cut it. Giving people the power back, historically, and I mean that with no uncertainty, historically, when people are given the power and can collaborate together en masse, stuff gets overturned. And whilst I have breath in my body, that will be the mission. And even if I get to the stage of leaving tools around for other people to build on, and that's as much as I can achieve, that's enough. If we can do more than that, that's a bonus.
Wow. And just listening to you now, it's incredibly inspiring. And I'm reminiscent really of that original vision of the World Wide Web by Tim Berners-Lee. It was one of decentralization and equal access. And that vision, as you've said, has been compromised over time. So I'm curious, what role do you see Self playing in helping realigning the web with those foundational principles? Because it feels like we've lost our way over the last few decades.
Yeah, I think Tim's view was twofold. One was indeed a decentralized system for freedom of information, but let's not not forget that the truth of it was to meet demand for automated information sharing between scientists and universities and institutes around the world. So yes, there was an ideological view and there was a practical requirement. I think that what we have to, it would be remiss of me not to try and manifest what it would have looked like if the World Wide Web was based on our individual sovereignty. And it's, as I say these words out loud with a smile, the challenge is not one of ideology. I don't find it hard to make the case for it from a human perspective, but the sheer adverse view of big tech that are trillion-dollar market cap companies to some extent is so opposite and opposite to this that it becomes almost a marketing vehicle in and of itself. And what I mean by that, Neil, is that it shouldn't be any form of inspiration or thought leadership to say that, hey guys, how about we build things for the people that actually are owned and controlled by the people? It shouldn't be anything other than, well, yeah, duh. But in fact, it's like, hey guys, we're going to build something that humans will pretty much hate in terms of user experience, but we're going to suck them into it because basically they're addicted to it. And we're going to cause greater depression and suicide rates, but we're going to make zillions. And everyone goes, yep, here's a check for $1 billion. And so it's a strange old world. That should be the kind of eye-opening, eyebrow-raising thing that people go, well, hold on a minute. That's not the way we want to run a society. That's not a future that we want. But it's the opposite of that. It's like you come up with something that makes complete basic human sense and everyone says, well, you're nuts. And then you build something that goes against human rights and actually screws people's lives up. And you're a billionaire. Strange.
It really is. And it feels like we've almost convinced ourselves that the Magnificent Seven in big tech, who are also currently propping up the stock market right now, that they make billions from every click, swipe that we make. And hey, that's just the way it is. And you've mentioned the potential, though, for technology structures to enable rather than restrict freedom. I absolutely love that line. So can you provide any examples of how Self is crafting such structures, particularly in enabling users to have control and ultimately ownership over their data?
Yeah, I think the starting point is that giving people the rights to access what's recorded and where things sit in the database. I mean, in Self, when you create an account, there's a preferences screen, which is what your AI has remembered, and you can then change it. Now, can you imagine that with any of the AI platforms? Like, can you imagine going into ChatGPT or any of the others and being able to see what's recorded in the background? Imagine.
Yeah, it's insane.
No, you're not allowed to see any of that. That's not for you. But so it starts there. Freedom to look at what's recorded on your database is like pretty basic. But moving forward, I think what's going to be the most fun is where people can see their own neural net, their digital twin neural net, to actually look at the Self brain and see how they use it and how their brain responds to them. And if you imagine that in the context of what we call entirety, and it's called entirety because freedom is everything. In the entirety OS, being able to visualize in a very simple, non-techie, non-geeky way how things are linked together, how your apps are linked together and how they operate, will mean that we get to a stage without needing to open 16 browser tabs to organize something or to download 5 different apps that evidently have no interest in speaking to each other. In entirety OS, and the developer SDK will have Self built in, that all of your apps are automatically linked together and also all serving you. So that's what I mean by freedom, in terms of freedom of not only data sovereignty, but freedom of choice and freedom of information, that's freedom of visualizing your information and freedom of how things are mapped together. And what we have to do is make it as easy as humanly possible. And that's why just a V1 of Self, and it shows people, like a really basic zoomed in way, this is what Self's recalled. And it's only the first take. We've been building it for ages, but we're now able to offer these things, and human rights starts with our freedom of, I think, a freedom of ourself and where our information is and how it's used. Why not be in our own control? That's what I think.
Brilliant. I think it's a perfect moment to end on. But before we do, we started the podcast talking about your origin story, the path that you've been on, and in a career where you've got extensive experience advising on change, digital transformation, innovation, and someone that's been that's seen the world of tech evolve from those early days before the World Wide Web to what it's become now. We're now looking towards the future. Things are moving faster than ever. What emerging trends do you think will significantly impact the ethical technology landscape in the near future? And how are you at Self preparing to navigate some of these changes that you're seeing?
Sure. I think a very, very quick answer to that, actually, because it's a simple answer, but I'll leave it with the listeners to digest the granularity of it. We are moving toward an even more visible crossroads between a utopian and dystopian outcome. And I think both will work in duality. I think we'll continue in the big tech direction of the Magnificent Seven. And I think that offerings like what I'm working with, and I hope millions more offerings, will show the alternative path. And that the more visible that alternative path gets, the more opportunities there will be for more firms and organizations and entrepreneurs to innovate in that space. So that's what I suspect future looks like. And how we're going to navigate that is make that path as blatantly clear as possible and promote that path and celebrate the path that others are on, and try and stop or reduce the abuse of the terms inside that path. Like, for instance, we're an ethical tech company, which people use without actually having ethical or moral principles that underpin every single decision-making. Or people say decentralization, like, for instance, Ethereum, which is as centralized as a bank. So the truth of the matter is the words decentralization, ethics, even the word freedom, even the word rights, corporate social responsibility, philanthropy, corporate giving. These are all abused terms. These are said because it makes people happy, and they're not actually done to their actual full and ontological extent. And as we move forward, we will notice and be able to call out those BS terms in buzzwords and greenwashing onward, and we'll start to see what it truly, really means. And I'm really, really happy that I'm able to help navigate some of that. And I'm hoping that we're part of a movement, a philosophical revolution, if you like, where we show an option to what I think is a brainwashed dystopian outcome future. And I'm happy to be where we are.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for spending a little time with me today, sharing your insights with everyone listening. And you didn't mention the word manifest a few moments ago. So as a fellow subscriber to the law of attraction, I'm going to see if there's something that we can do for you now, because some of the biggest names in business, VC funding and tech have either been guests or may even listen to this podcast. So is there a person you'd love to have a breakfast or lunch with? And who would that person be and why? Because he or she might just be listening to this episode today. So let's see what we can manifest together. But who would it be?
I don't know their name or their names. But whoever it is, someone may have listened to this and gone, I or we would love to back something that is building the alternative path. And please do get in touch, because it's the really collaborating with people who want to be part of building the future and are not thinking, well, we want the next unicorn story. That and resonate with this manifesto. And I mean, you can go to self.app/manifesto. You can even search on your favorite search engines the word pursuit of human freedom and then my name, Jonathan MacDonald, and you can read even more of my backstory of whatever results you click on in pursuit of human freedom. People who resonate with that, you'll know if it's you. If you're listening to this and go, stop the podcast, I need to contact immediately. It's just j@self.app, then do it. And yeah, if it doesn't resonate, then I wish the other path all the best. But if it does, then wow, Neil, if you and I have managed to manifest that, then it will be worth its weight in gold and much appreciated. You'll be doing the right thing for humans.
I think that's a beautiful moment to end on. So I will throw that out into the universe, into the ether. Let's see what we can manifest there. I'll also add links to everything you mentioned there, just so people can find out anything that they need more easily. And there's so many big things on your site there. From those 6 commitments, make decisions that are in accordance with human rights, to not cause or enable harm while upholding those rights, enable people to have control and ownership of their own data and decide how it's used. It's so straightforward, as you said, but it seems that we have lost our way and gone completely in the wrong direction, but we are approaching those crossroads. So for anyone listening, I do urge that they check you out and maybe be a part of that movement too. But more than anything, just thank you for sharing your story today.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me, mate.
Reflecting on my conversation with Jonathan, I think it's clear that the intersection of technology and ethics, it presents both a formidable challenge and also a beacon of hope for the future. And Jonathan's commitment to reversing the power of dynamics of big tech and championing user privacy and control through self is a testament to the possibility of a utopian tech future. I've said many times on this podcast, how many tech or science fiction films have you seen that show a positive future? If you can think of one, send me an email now, techblogwriter@outlook.com. I'd love for you to share them, because most films always show the dystopian side, and we need more optimism. So amid the hurdles of fundraising and the pervasive pursuit of profit over principles, Jonathan's dedication to an ethical alternative path, for me, it illuminates a vital role of human rights in shaping technology. And as we all ponder the crossroads between dystopian and utopian tech futures, Jonathan's insights compel me to consider our role in this narrative. So how are we going to contribute to fostering an ethical technological landscape? What steps can we take to ensure that technology amplifies rather than undermines our freedoms? Over to you. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @NeilC.Hughes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one. But as we close this chapter of our discussion, let's carry forward the conversation on ethical technology and its profound impact on our lives. What actions will you take to support a future where technology upholds our dignity and our rights? So much to think about, and you've got a few hours to think about that, and let me know your thoughts. But other than that, I'll return again tomorrow with another topic to keep you thinking and keep that curiosity alive. But thank you for listening today, and until next time, don't be a stranger.